What should click in a person's head so that he wants to get rid of his partner in the truest sense of the word? I wanted a normal and peaceful life. I wanted to be surrounded by loving and caring people. But instead, I was surrounded by real psychopaths who pursued their goal. Just to dispel any notions that I, Brian Kepler, might be perceived as some sort of superhero in reading my tale, remember that in reality, chance and circumstance affect us all, and occasionally, though perhaps infrequently, that chance is favorable. I'm not your run-of-the-mill guy. My career as a business consultant brings in considerable income, and I maintain above-average physical fitness, thanks to a workout regimen I established back in college, which I still adhere to today. Other than that, though, I'm pretty ordinary. As this story begins, I'm 30 years old, married, with no children yet, though I anticipate that changing soon. One constant focus throughout my life has been my desire to be a father, and I'm hopeful that my wife is now ready to embrace motherhood. My personal details, such as my dating history, favorite color, or basketball team, are not crucial to accurately telling my story. The important thing is that when this story began, my wife, Melanie, was also 30 years old, and I understood who she was. Melanie is incredibly beautiful and attractive. However, if you focus solely on her appearance, it will not convey her essence. I must admit, when I married her, my previous judgments were clouded by desire. Although I loved her, there were times when her unpredictable nature, especially her tendency to jealousy, made me doubt my decision to propose to her. And yet, every time she drove me crazy, I fortunately forgot about her difficulties. Melanie comes from a large family consisting mostly of men, including her 4 younger brothers. I have a close bond with one of them, Tom. Despite the fact that Tom was gay, he did not confide in his father about it. However, he trusted me with this information. It is not known if Melanie is aware of this, since we have never touched on this topic. The remaining 3 brothers, 2 of whom are fraternal twins, fall somewhere between being unpleasant and downright obnoxious. Melanie's father, Jerry, shares the same unpleasant traits as those 3 brothers I don't get along with. I have a good relationship with Melanie's mother, Samantha, despite the fact that she has 5 children and was 51 years old when this story began. She had Melanie when she was 21. Samantha is remarkably attractive and evidently passed on her genes to make Melanie stunning. Samantha could easily be considered one of the most attractive women over 50, rivaled only by Elizabeth Hurley. I'm unsure why Samantha married Jerry. She must have a high tolerance for pain. One condition Jerry insisted on before Melanie and I got married, which I was more than willing to accept as long as it was reciprocal, was a prenuptial agreement with an infidelity clause. I had just finished a business consultation around 6:00 p.m. in a city an hour's drive from my home, still within the same state. Shortly after, I received a text from an unfamiliar number. The message warned, "Be cautious. There are individuals targeting you. Take immediate precautions." Upon attempting to call the number back, I encountered no response or voicemail. Typically not one to easily succumb to fear, something about this text unsettled me deeply. Moreover, recent peculiar incidents at home, particularly concerning Melanie's erratic behavior, heightened my sense of unease. Over the past month or so, she had exhibited mood swings, oscillating between unnecessary hostility and intense affection. Despite my willingness to overlook her behavior due to the latter, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Consequently, I decided to hire a private investigator to delve into the matter, anticipating results within a couple of days. The consultancy I was working with happened to be near a strip of retail stores, one of which was a sporting goods store. Inside, I purchased some protective gear worn by soccer players, an oversized football jersey, a pair of cross-training shoes, and a gym bag where I stowed my suit coat, tie, leather-soled shoes, and dress shirt. Additionally, I bought a hunting knife and a small hammer intended for tent stakes. I admit I felt somewhat absurd leaving the store with these items, although apart from the protective gear, as I never played soccer, Everything else would come in handy. Since Melanie wasn't expecting me until around 9:00 p.m., originally planned to dine with my clients, but they had an emergency, I decided to grab a meal at a local Johnny Rockets. It was approximately 7:30 p.m. when I began walking back to my car and darkness had fallen. As I approached my car, I heard a noise behind me. Swiftly turning, I spotted a masked individual wielding a blunt object in their left hand, swinging it towards me. Instinctively, I raised my left arm to block the attack. In a fraction of a second, two thoughts raced through my mind. The warning was accurate, followed by, "I'm grateful I invested in those children's soccer shin guards and wore them on my forearms." Then, luck intervened. With a speed I didn't know I possessed, I drew the tense spike hammer from my belt and delivered a decisive blow to the left side of the attacker's head, precisely at his temple, causing him to collapse instantly. Given my lack of prowess in tennis, wood chopping, or even hammering nails, the accuracy of my strike was purely fortuitous. Although my left forearm was in pain, it wasn't too severe. Fortunate because I spotted two more figures advancing towards me, one from the right and one from the left. Fortunately, luck was on my side as I deflected an attack from the person on my left with my left forearm and struck him on the head with my small hammer. While this sent him tumbling down, it also snapped the wooden handle of my hammer. Just in time, I noticed the person on my right swiftly approaching and identified his weapon as a tire iron, luckily sized for a compact car, not a truck. He opted for a different approach, swinging at my left lower leg. The impact would have incapacitated me if I hadn't been wearing adult soccer shin guards, though it still hurt immensely. My ability to remain standing startled him, allowing me to overpower him and bring him to the ground. When I had subdued the third attacker and he was lying on the ground, I retrieved the hunting knife from its sheath on my belt. It had been concealed by my football jersey. Placing the blade against his neck, he immediately began to groan. "I surrender. I surrender. Don't hurt me." I knelt down, transferred the knife to my left hand, and pressed it against his throat while I reached for my cell phone. With one hand, I dialed 911. 911. What's your emergency? I was just assaulted by 3 masked individuals on the street. 2 are incapacitated, and I have the third at knife point. I need immediate assistance from 2 ambulances and the police. Where are you located? I'm unfamiliar with this city, but I estimate I'm a couple of 100 yards from the sporting goods store on Chestnut Street, with a Target store almost directly opposite. Can you track my cell phone signal? We'll attempt to locate you. Stay on the line, and when you spot a police vehicle, alert them to your location by standing up. Understood. I'm wearing a red football jersey, and my attackers are all wearing ski masks. They're all on the ground, 2 injured, and the third with my knife at his throat. Additional interaction occurred, and fortunately, a police car arrived promptly within 2 minutes. I warned the conscious assailant that I would stab him if he attempted to flee before the officers arrived, then signaled for help. I had already kicked the tire iron out of his reach. 2 officers swiftly approached, one wielding a flashlight and both with guns drawn. Identifying myself as the 911 caller, I declared my intention to drop my knife and displayed my cell phone connected to the emergency line above my head. As they neared, I informed them that the conscious assailant was one of the attackers. The male officer restrained him, while the female officer, in a procedure unfamiliar to me from TV, took my cell phone to speak with the 911 operator. After a brief conversation, she ended the call and returned my phone, instructing me to stand 6 feet away with my hands raised while they dealt with the other 2 assailants. By the time they finished examining the others, 3 more police cars and an ambulance had arrived. After a weapons check and removal of my protective gear, the female officer escorted me to the back of her squad car. I noticed my forearm and shin guards were cracked, but they had served their purpose. I found myself seated in the rear of the police cruiser for just around 5 minutes before a duo of detectives, one male and one female, swung open the back door. They introduced themselves as Cagney and Lucy. I'd wager you endure a fair amount of ribbing with a surname like Lacey, especially paired with a female detective named Cagney, I quipped to the male detective, attempting to inject humor into the tense situation. How did I recognize the reference to the old TV show, Cagney and Lacey, which aired from 1982 to 1986? Well, one summer during my teenage years, I sustained a significant injury while playing pickup basketball, which left me sidelined for nearly 2 weeks. To stave off boredom, I became intimately familiar with numerous classic TV programs on a local nostalgia channel, including the aforementioned Cagney and Lacey. Lucy appeared imposing and somewhat unkempt. To me, he resembled a human embodiment of a Saint Bernard. Cagney resembled a modern TV portrayal of a female cop, too charming to be entirely realistic. Despite her petite stature, likely standing no taller than 5 feet 4 inches, 163 centimeters, and weighing less than 125 pounds, 57 kilos, she exuded toughness. Her pantsuit appeared to strain slightly at her chest, not that I was paying much attention. Cagney chuckled at my remark, while Lucy simply growled, "Don't get smart. Come with us to the station. I'll need my gym bag and the protective gear the uniformed officer confiscated," I responded. "We can stow the gym bag in the trunk of our car, but the protective gear is evidence, so it stays. Before we depart, we'll need you to identify the weapons on the ground," Cagney stated, while Lucy stashed my gym bag in the trunk of his unmarked Ford Victoria. I informed Cagney that the hunting knife and the damaged small hammer belonged to me. I clarified that the tire iron belonged to the conscious, masked individual, while the other 2 weapons, which I couldn't identify clearly in the darkness, were wielded by the other 2 assailants, though I couldn't assign each weapon to a specific individual. As I recounted this, I noticed that the first assailant I struck was still on the ground, while the other had been taken away by the ambulance. "Why is the first assailant still here?" I inquired of Cagney. "He's deceased," came Cagney's stoic response. That revelation deeply unsettled me. The interrogation room in the police station sported an unpleasant shade of green, while the plastic chair I occupied offered little comfort. However, the silver lining was the prompt initiation of the interview. I began by providing Cagney and Lucy with a detailed account, showcasing the enigmatic text message on my phone along with the receipt from my purchase at the sporting goods store. Following my narrative, they proceeded to interrogate me for the next 10 to 15 minutes. I endeavored to respond truthfully and comprehensively, attempting to divide my gaze between them instead of fixating solely on Cagney, as my instincts dictated. Suddenly, there came a knock at the door, and a woman resembling a technician entered, presenting Lucy with some photographs. After the technician departed, Lucy remarked, "I understand you might not have identified your attackers with their ski masks on, but we have photos of their faces. Maybe you'll recognize them from the photos." He then handed me all 3 8x 11-inch photos simultaneously, 2 of living individuals and 1 of a deceased individual. With just a quick glance at the images, I exclaimed, "What the hell?" as I rose abruptly, inadvertently causing my chair to collide with the wall. "These are 3 of my damn brothers-in-law," I growled. "Take a seat, calm down," Cagney interjected, clearly startled by my outburst. "Are you certain?" "Absolutely," I snapped back. "I know what those jerks look like." "Why would your brothers-in-law be targeting you?" Lucy inquired. "I'm not sure. Our relationship isn't great, but I haven't done anything specific to provoke them. Moreover, despite their flaws, I never sensed any violent tendencies from them." Cagney and Lucy continued questioning me for another 30 minutes until I reached my limit. "Look, you already know I acted in self-defense, so I'm leaving." "I'm traumatized," I asserted. "Fine, just give us your shirt, pants, and shoes," Lucy replied. "Fetch my gym bag and a pair of sweatpants so I can change. Then I'm out. You've got all my contact details. If you need more, call me, and I'll answer any further queries you or the prosecutor have." Cagney handed me one of her business cards, adding with a smirk, "My cell number's on the back. Ring if anything else comes up." As I bid her farewell, I held her hand a little longer than necessary. I refrained from contacting Melanie during my journey home. My thoughts were consumed by conspiracy theories. I found it difficult to believe that Melanie's brothers would launch an attack on me without her awareness, and perhaps even her encouragement or direct orders. This realization led me to suspect that it was her brother Tom, whom I considered a friend, who had warned me about the potential danger. I couldn't shake the suspicion that Melanie's father, Jerry, might also be involved, as the actions of the troublesome brothers seemed to align with his wishes. As I completed my hour-long drive, during which my mind raced with various thoughts, I experienced a whirlwind of emotions. Strangely, upon arriving home around 11 p.m., a mix of anger and desire overwhelmed me, a sensation entirely new to me. When I entered the house, Melanie was in the kitchen in a bathrobe. As soon as she saw me, her face turned pale, which confirmed my suspicions. However, she quickly pulled herself together. "Brian, darling, why are you so late?" "I was already getting worried," she said. "What were you worried about, my sweet Melanie?" I replied. "That something bad happened to you," she explained. "Well, I do have bruises on my left forearm and shin," I said with a grin, taking off my shirt and sweatpants right in the kitchen, things I got from the cops. While I was undressing, Melanie seemed agitated. I took off my t-shirt, socks, and shoes. She looked confused as she watched me. "Honey, why are you undressing? What is it?" she asked, completely confused and turning pale again. "Because you might be leaving soon, and I want to make the most of our time together," I chuckled. As soon as I said the word leave, I quickly headed towards Melanie. I quickly led her into the bedroom. Before putting Melanie on our bed, I paused at her dresser, opened the top drawer, and took out 2 of her scarves. Throwing her on the bed, I tied her right arm to the sturdy metal headboard with 1 scarf. "Brian, honey, what's going on?" "You're scaring me," she repeated several times. I was silent while I tied her left arm to the headboard with another scarf. I felt not only stronger than usual, but also as powerful as the Incredible Hulk. Although for various reasons I would not like to recall the emotional state of that night, one aspect that I would love to experience is the surge of energy that I experienced. In between our meetings, we spent time in the bathroom and shower, but in bed, I kept her wrists tied to the headboard, fearing possible betrayal. The following morning, I retrieved Cagney's business card and dialed her cell phone. After introducing myself, I went straight to the point. "I believe my wife orchestrated the attack on me. Could you apprehend her for questioning?" Cagney responded, "Since you reside in another city, we've decided to involve the state police. Can I send a couple of troopers to your residence this morning?" "Absolutely. By 11 a.m., I should have evidence from her cell phone," I chuckled. I allowed Melanie to get dressed, while she alternated between thanking me for rocking her world the previous night and pleading with me to untie her. "Honey." I acknowledged the former, but kept her hands restrained behind her back in response to the latter. This led me to have to feed her breakfast, but it was a preferable option to her wielding a kitchen cleaver against me. Considering that I pay Melanie's mobile phone bills as part of my plan, and despite the fact that I warned her otherwise, she continues to use the same easily guessed password, QWERTY, which surprisingly ranked 5th among the most common passwords in the United States in 2023. This made it easier for me to access her text messages, including the ones she deleted, since the iPhone usually syncs with her Mac computer, which I don't have. By the time the state troopers arrived at my residence at 11:14 a.m., I had already received copies of her conversations with Jerry's father and her dim-witted brothers, in which they discussed plans to harm me, both digitally and in print. Upon arrival, the police replaced the ropes binding Melanie's hands with handcuffs, informed her of her rights, and took her into custody. It was only after she was tied up that her behavior changed from trying to be nice to being hostile. One of the particularly unexpected accusations she made was, "You shameless cheater," for two reasons. Firstly, it was obvious that I had a male anatomy, and secondly, I had never cheated on her. Jerry, Melanie, and the two living miscreant brothers faced murder charges for the death of the third miscreant, rendering them ineligible for bail. This development would facilitate my divorce proceedings, although I already had sufficient grounds for divorce, as indicated by the private investigator's findings, 3 days post Melanie's arrest. His subsequent revelation, supported by visual and auditory evidence, prompted me to file for divorce on grounds of adultery, thereby enforcing the prenuptial agreement. Initially, I was taken aback when Melanie countersued for adultery. However, following the initial phase of legal discovery and my deposition, she withdrew her countersuit. It appeared that she had been provided with doctored photographs of me with an acquaintance named Rosie Wilson by a colleague named Reginald Buttress. However, with multiple witnesses, and in some instances, video evidence confirming my absence during the alleged encounters with Rosie, Melanie's case crumbled. Several positive outcomes arose amidst the turmoil of my divorce and the legal proceedings against Melanie, her father, and her two troublesome brothers. One silver lining was the strengthening of my bond with Samantha, Melanie's mother. Samantha, dismayed by her family's actions, offered heartfelt apologies, and I eventually convinced her to cease blaming herself. Additionally, I connected Samantha with my divorce attorney, assisting her in filing for divorce from Jerry. In the face of adversity, Samantha and I transitioned from former in-law relations to close friends. Furthermore, Cagney, collaborating with the state police and prosecutor, displayed relentless determination in pursuing legal action against Melanie, Jerry, and the two brothers, increasing the likelihood of their conviction. Cagney's thoroughness extended to our personal conversations, prompting candid exchanges between us. Another positive development occurred when Jerry's absence led Tom to come out as gay. Though he denied sending the warning text with a grin, I expressed gratitude by gifting him a coveted Breitling endurance watch. One of the negative aspects, which may have been compounded by my abstinence from intimacy since I refrained from finalizing the divorce so as not to complicate the situation related to Melanie's adultery in accordance with the prenuptial agreement, were intense dreams, which I actively wanted to avoid. The characters featured in these dreams alternated between two women who made me uneasy when I saw them in my dreams. Another moderately positive occurrence was Melanie's complete agreement to the divorce terms I propose. Through her lawyer, she pleaded to meet me. When I saw her in a jail visiting room, Melanie did not appear well in her orange jumpsuit, though her beauty still shone through. She sought my presence to confess what had occurred and to implore my forgiveness. Reginald manipulated me into believing you were unfaithful, which fueled my anger and jealousy, leading me to cheat with him. When I discussed divorce with my father, and he learned of my infidelity, he worried about the prenup's cheating clause nullifying any financial gain for me. That's when he suggested taking action against you, Melanie tearfully confessed. I remained silent as Melanie composed herself and continued. My biggest regret is allowing my father to involve my brothers and disclose your business trip plans. Can you find it in your heart to forgive me? After pondering for a moment, I replied, I'll forgive you if you confess to the prosecutor. You might receive a favorable plea deal and an earlier release compared to your family. Thank you, Brian. I promise to do so, she said, smiling through her tears. I know I have no right to ask, but can you ensure Reginald faces consequences? I smiled back, saying, Goodbye, Melanie. Take care of yourself from now on. True to her word, Melanie struck a deal with the prosecutor shortly after our meeting. She pleaded guilty to conspiracy and manslaughter, receiving a sentence of 10 to 12 years in prison. Samantha and I both finalized our divorces during the same week. She was in the process of selling her house and relocating to her hometown, where her elderly parents, 2 sisters, and their families resided. Tom would also be moving there. Despite needing a couple more weeks to settle her affairs, Samantha received a good offer for her house on the condition that she vacate immediately. Aware that I would offer her a place to stay during this transition, she eagerly accepted. Samantha moved into my guest room on a Wednesday, and we planned to go out to celebrate our divorces that Friday. "If you don't mind hanging out with an older woman," she joked with me. "You mean a woman who will undoubtedly be the most attractive person wherever we go," I teased back. "Flatterer," she laughed. In truth, it wasn't flattery. When she emerged from the guest bathroom, just before we left for our celebratory evening on Friday, I was taken aback. As previously mentioned, Samantha was already stunning for a 52-year-old woman, but that night she was simply breathtaking, regardless of age. "Wow," I exclaimed, "you look amazing." "Not too shabby yourself," Samantha grinned, adjusting my tie. "Wait a moment, I need to grab my axe handle," I joked. "Why?" she inquired. "To fend off all the ogling creeps when they see you in that dress," I replied. She chuckled and planted a kiss on my cheek. Just then, the doorbell rang. It was our limo driver. As we strolled to the limo, it was evident we both desired two things that night. She wanted me to treat her like a date, and I wanted to treat her like the only one. The dinner and nightclub were enchanting. It was undeniably one of the top 10 dates of my life. However, even more enchanting was the anticipation of what lay ahead. After we finished swaying to "At Last" by Etta James, Samantha leaned back, whispering in my ear as she tugged on my tie. "Will you take me home?" I whispered in return, "No, but I will love you." When we got home, instead of lashing out at each other, we started doing things slowly. There was no rush, just a lot of tenderness. I picked Samantha up and carried her to the shower room in the master bedroom. After making sure the water was hot, I helped Samantha take a shower. When she washed up and smiled, she returned the favor. After we were dry, I picked her up again and carried her to my bed, kissing her as we walked. I carefully laid her on the bottom sheet, having previously pulled back the blanket in the top sheet. What followed was the most enjoyable activity of my life. Despite the fact that I thought I was in love with Melanie, and before her, I had a steady girlfriend, my connection with Samantha reached another spiritual level. After I pulled away, we lay side by side, looking into each other's eyes. The only light source in the room was a bedside lamp, softly shimmering in shades of red, blue, green, white, and purple. Although I didn't have to say anything, I found myself saying, "It was the most incredible experience of my life," in a thoughtful tone. Her dreamy response was, "I've never felt closer to another person," and a kiss on the lips followed. After several long minutes of contented silence, she added with a smile, "Now, let's find out how primitive we can be." Over the next 16 days and nights, which I refrained from counting, I experienced the most intense encounters of my life. All this time I was constantly thinking, why couldn't Melanie be like her mother? During these 16 days, I repeatedly voiced what Samantha already knew, my love for her. Every time she answered, "I'm 21 years older than you. I can't fulfill your dearest wish to become a father. So you should look for someone of childbearing age with whom you can start a family. My devotion to you surpasses my desire to become a father," was my usual response. "But in the end, you'd be offended at me for that. Tarnishing the memory of the best 2 weeks of our lives," was her typical response. As I watched Samantha leave on her last day, tears welled up in both of our eyes. Before she opened our last embrace, she whispered in my ear, "You have to find someone you love and build a family with them. Otherwise, I will carry the burden of guilt for luring you to bed for the rest of my days." I grinned through my tears. "I lured you, goddess." By immersing myself in my work, maintaining a regular exercise routine, staying informed about the progress of the legal proceedings against my adversaries, and devising plans for retaliation against Reginald, I managed to limit my thoughts about Melanie's betrayal and Samantha's loyalty to just 1 hour a day. During this time, Cagney kept me informed about all developments, as she had close ties with the prosecutor's office. Following Melanie's admission of guilt, the two brothers finally came to their senses and pleaded guilty as well. Each received sentences ranging from 15 to 20 years in prison. Initially, Jerry was adamant about going to trial, but when it became evident that his 3 implicated children would testify against him, he relented. As the children all identified him as the mastermind, Jerry received a sentence ranging from 18 to 25 years. Just before Jerry's plea, I managed to seek vengeance on Reginald and fulfill Melanie's request from the only time I met her since her arrest. The statute of limitations hasn't expired on what I did to Reginald, so unfortunately, I can't disclose the specifics. I can tell you, however, that it was a classic case of literary revenge. Cagney and I attended each guilty plea, and afterward, I treated her to lunch. On every occasion, she appeared in court dressed smartly, albeit professionally, until Jerry's plea. That day she arrived in a dress, and I must admit, I was impressed by her legs and overall appearance. You clean up well, Lisa, but do they allow you to investigate cases like that? I teased, switching from calling her Cagney to her actual name, Lisa, since she resembled the actress Sharon Glass from the old TV series. No, silly. I took a day off and decided I wanted to embrace my femininity for a change. Lisa chuckled. When we were walking to her car after lunch, Lisa, who had amazing strength for her physique, pushed me against her. Either you don't notice anything, or you're not interested in what I have to offer, buddy, because you've never asked me out on a normal date, she said. I was caught off guard, but at the same time I liked it as evidenced by the reaction of my body. Then I said something I'd never thought of before, something I didn't think I was capable of. Let's spend 3 or 4 days at a luxury resort I'm buying and see how well we fit together, I said, running my hand over her shoulder, a move that could have ended badly if she had been wearing a gun belt. Okay, she replied, grabbing my instrument. But if we get along, I want to start a family. I'm 32, and my biological clock is ticking. A strong bond has been established between us. After we behaved like real lovers for 3 days, and our bedding was amazing and even better than what I had with Samantha, our relationship began. 3 months later, she quit her job as a detective, became a security consultant, and moved in with me. 3 months after that, we got married. Now, 5 years after our wedding, Lisa Kepler has given birth to 3 children and has undergone tubal ligation. I am fulfilling my dream of becoming a father. I have a loving and stable wife, and life is wonderful.